Welcome to today's strategy session, a very nice one, and it comes straight from and we like to call it Steal Our Secrets, because we just openly share our secrets now. If it's useful for you, steal it or borrow it, that's fine. We don't need it back. A little bit about HoneyComb. We do three things. We do strategy basically for business growth. We do training primarily for sales, but also marketing, leadership, team building. We do the content side as well. So that means the creation and the craftsmanship, including the scheduling and the strategy and so forth. So basically the full package, what you need as a business, as a company, or even as a corporation to get to the next level, to optimize processes and to get to an improved ROI. A little bit about ourselves. This is HoneyComb, Ali Garcia and myself, the co-founders, and on top you see some of the exciting brands that we've had the pleasure of working with over the past 25 years. But now, put all your questions in the chat, and there will be questions and there will also be answers, hopefully, because I prepared some questions for you. So it's a little bit more interactive. We get to know each other a little bit better, and I hope that makes it a little bit more interesting this time and moving forward. The first question is, why do we need a structure in our sales call? And that's a question that I'm happy to answer for you. Well, it's very simple. Once we have a structure, we can focus on our objective. And our objective, almost any time in any sales call, is to close the deal, close the lead, and turn them into a buying customer. The other thing is that once you know of the structure, once you have take that structure in and memorized it, you can speak with authority and confidence, which is absolutely crucial, especially in the first 15 to 30 seconds. That really needs to be spot on. One thing that you can do, and we always recommend that, is to draft a sales script or a call guide and use that with every call you make. And that's one thing that all the great sales people that I know in my life, in my 25 years of being in the business, everybody does that. The high performers in sales, they all have a sales script because it just helps you focus, it helps you build your authority and to get through that crucial opening in the first 15 to 30 seconds. The structure also gives us flexibility throughout the call, because once we have the structure and we have the structure in front of us, we can jump back and forth to wherever we need to be in the conversation, depending on how the conversation goes, depending on what information we can gather from our prospect. Because remember, in our last session, we always have meaningful customer-centric sales calls. So forget about all the old stuff about always be closing, movies like Boiler Room or Wall Street and stuff like that had its time back in the 80s, maybe even 70s and throughout the 80s. But what we do here is a customer-centric sales process and also basically a sales training. It's very important to put the customer in the center of our conversation, and by doing that and by drafting the sales script in such a way that we can ask open questions and having that structure in front of us, we are most likely and more likely to close more leads quicker and better qualified leads at that. And as I said, once we have the flexibility, we can go back and forth to our structure. We don't lose the focus. We can always revert back to where we were and also where we want to go within the conversation. Just remember, you always have to lead the conversation, and the person who asks the questions in a conversation leads the conversation. And we did that in the past strategy session where we talked about the sales script, how you can draft it, what questions are important to ask, and how you formulate it in a way that it stays customer centric and it's not pitchy and it's not salesy. And to me, that's the new way of sales in the digital world. We still have the analog kind of picking up the phone, especially when you talk about B2B. We will always have that touch point with prospect or with a lead to pick up the phone and just go through the conversation and having the most meaningful conversation that we can have in order to gather the intelligence that we need, but also stay very structured, because at the end of the day, we have our objective, we have our goals, and we don't do the call just because we have time. We always have a goal in mind when we go into a call. The old saying, mastery cometh with practice. That sounds medieval, and I love that, but that's what it is. You need to make as many sales calls as possible / sales conversations as possible, because then you get into the habit of speaking, asking the right questions, and of knowing your way around certain objectives. We already talked about that in one of the past strategy sessions. We have loads of stuff on our blog when it comes to objection handling. So with every sales conversation that you have, you get more and more firm in your structure, in objection handling, and then further down the road in objection prevention, which is a masterclass of modern sales, of the new way of sales. So practice. And one thing I've come across very often, and I had that myself, is the fear of picking up the phone and talking to people. And you can only overcome that by doing that. There is no secret potion that you can take and all of a sudden you're confident. When you start out with making these calls, you will feel absolutely awkward, especially when you're new to sales. And that is also one thing that, especially when you have a startup, when you're starting your journey or start your business, a lot of businesses, a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs don't focus on the sales side. They are too excited about the idea, about a website, about a prototype, but eventually what keeps the business afloat is the money, the cash flow, the money that's coming in. And in order to generate the money and the cash flow, what do you need? You need sales. Everything in life itself is sales. And that applies to business, but also your personal life, right? Relationship. That's basically a sale, right? So you have a sales conversation with a person you fancy, and it's so versatile, and it's so important also for every person to just embrace sales. And it has that bad, connotation to it, and I don't understand why. I do understand why, because I had the same animosities against it, but then I started doing it 25 years ago, and it just gets better and better. Because as long as you have something of value, a product, a service, yourself, something of value that you can provide and add to someone else's business and improve what they are doing, improve their life, improve their business, i.e. a solution to your prospects' problems, then it's not salesy at all. You want to help, you need to help. If you have a solution to a problem, I think it's your duty to basically help as many people and many businesses as possible. And you can do that by becoming really good and great at sales and ultimately master it. Now, don't get me wrong, there's always good conversations and bad conversations. I have the full scale of very bad to very good every day. You have a person on the phone who is just not receptive, who is not open, or who hangs up or tells you to bugger off. That happens as well. But the more you do that, the more you go through these situations, the more resilience you build up. And that is so important, because you just need to pick up the phone again. You hang up, you pick up the phone again, you dial the next number, or you go into the next meeting, or you meet the next person. And the more often you do that, it really becomes, I would say, second nature. And hopefully at a certain point in time, you love sales. That's basically my objective for these strategy sessions. I want everybody to love sales, because it's absolutely brilliant for your business, but also as a life lesson, I think. First question. Now it's up to you. Please type it in the chat. When was your last sales call? So you had a prospect, you got on the phone and you just had a conversation. And when was that? When was the last sales call that you had? Type it in there. If you never had a sales call, type that in. That's absolutely fine. That's what we're here for. So when was your last sales call? No reaction. And there we have it. Perfect. Thank you very much. One comment was a question. We do the questions at the very end after the presentation. So we have the last call was last Friday. The last call was yesterday. Brilliant. Perfect. Next question. What was the outcome of that call? What was the outcome? Again, type it in the chat. Wait a couple of moments. What was the outcome of your last sales call? And we have one reply. Thank you very much. Customer is comparing services. Perfect. And we have another response, another reply. I think it means I sold 2 services to 1 person. So perfect, wonderful. I'll take the first reply, customers comparing services, back to the end of this session and answer that, because that is something that you can easily solve within the call. So you have a different and more positive outcome. Thank you very much for the answers. And last question, what were the challenges in that call? Maybe the prospect said something and you went completely blank. You didn't know what to say. Maybe you didn't have a sales script yet. How you draft that, you already know. If not, we can host another session about that. That's absolutely fine. So what were the challenges in that call? One reply, of course, I sold. Perfect. Congratulations. So no challenges there. Was there one situation where you struggled in the conversation, although you closed it and you did that brilliantly, and congratulations to that? Were there a situation where you struggled with what to say, or was the conversation flowing? Let's just wait for the answers in the chat. And we have another reply. Customer wants a trial session. Perfect. Fantastic. So that could be an objective for an outcome, right? So your outcome would be, for example, not to sell a customer or to get a buying customer, but the first step could be get them on a trial session. That's perfectly fine. And that's your conversion from prospect to lead. Perfect. Then we have, it was the fact that the person had previous bad experience. Okay, customer wants a trial, which we're offering for Thursday. Perfect. Fantastic. Good. Thank you very much for your feedback. Very interesting. So you do have sales calls. You do have great outcomes. If that's your desired outcome, to have, of course, to sell, to get a buying customer, that's like top league. Fantastic. Or to offer a free session. Whatever it is, if it's the next step in your sales funnel, that's absolutely fine. So let's dive right into it. What are the 4 elements of a sales call? And maybe you will recognize some or all of the elements that we talk about from your past sales calls. And if you have any questions or any comments also, type it in and we'll have a discussion about that at the end of the presentation. Number 1 is, the first element is of course the opening, right? So you pick up the phone, the prospect picks up the phone as well, and then comes the opening. So how do you present yourself? The first 15, 30 seconds, so crucial, so important. How do you do that? As I said, the first 30 seconds are really crucial. You have to speak with confidence. And if you're not a person who can portray confidence, don't worry about it. You can practice that, right? It's a habit. You can learn these skills. You can learn to pretend to be confident, even if you are not. And that's absolutely fine. As I said, the more sales calls you make, the more confident you will be, the better your sales script, the better you will be in the opening, and also the better your research before you even pick up the phone about your prospect, about their business, the more confident you will be in your call. What can we do in the opening? If it's someone we already talked to, we can recap previous conversations, right? Maybe we have a callback date agreed with the prospect last week, and then we pick up the phone and call them again, and we simply recap the previous conversations, right? Dear Mr. or Mrs. XYZ, last week we talked about points A, B, C, D. Just a small recap so everybody's on the same page. And that also builds rapport. And building rapport is absolutely crucial. And when we go a little bit deeper into the session, that's one element that's absolutely crucial. If you want to keep a conversation flowing and going and get the most out of it, you need to build rapport. And there are so many ways how you can build rapport. And it's definitely not talking about the weather, right? So if you do, that's not rapport building in the methodological method. Is that the right word? In the method that we train here and show here. So there are certain other ways that we can build rapport. And also in the opening, we have to introduce ourselves, even if we had a previous conversation, but especially if it's the first conversation that you're going to have with a prospect, you need to introduce yourself. And also there are certain tweaks and certain phrases that you can use and you should use to introduce yourself. So it doesn't sound pitchy, it doesn't sound salesy. It basically is really just an introduction. And that's all we want. We want the other person to know and understand who we are and why we are calling them, especially if you call them on mobile phone. One of the objections that are most common are, for example, where'd you get my number from? Especially if it's a cold call. And then also in the opening, we need to get a commitment from the prospect to ask questions. So if we had previous conversations before, that's of course easier because everybody's already on the same page. But if you call someone for the first time and maybe they hadn't even heard about you or who you are, they don't know you, we need to get a commitment to ask questions, because as soon as we have that commitment, we are free to dive into the methodologies that we show and highlight that are most successful in every sales conversation, things like BAND or SPIN or FAB, for example. So once you have that commitment, you can get the conversation flowing and lead the conversation as well. But we need that commitment and the permission so that we can ask the questions. Number 2, gathering intelligence. And here we are, asking questions. Every sales call is based on these things, based on certain questions to phrase it in a certain way so that it's not salesy and not pitchy. I know I keep saying that, but it's so important that you don't appear to be salesy or pushy or desperate. That's the worst. So we have to phrase the questions in a way that the prospect opens up naturally or step by step, right? The more rapport you build throughout the conversation, the more likely it is that they open up and they basically give you the information that you need to gather in order to qualify the prospect. And again, depending on which methodology you apply, SPIN or BAND or FAB or combination of both, there are sets of questions that you should absolutely apply in order to get the intelligence, to get the information from the prospect. So let's have a look at that. Most important thing absolutely is ask open questions, right? Avoid these closed questions where the prospect has the chance to answer with just one word or one sentence. Yes, no, we don't do that, blah, blah, blah. So that doesn't get you the conversation flow that you absolutely need. So it's not a sales call per se where someone pitches and the other one listens. Absolutely not. You have to control that conversation and you have to ask these questions in such a way that you get the intelligence, but it also makes the prospect feel comfortable to open up and give you the information that you need. And then you need to ask questions about certain things. I'm touching a little bit into band, a little bit into spin here, and we have different sessions about that in detail. So just a little bit of an overview here. Of course, you need to ask questions about the current situation of the customer or of the prospect. What's their current situation, their personal situation, their business situation, of the strategy situation of where they are at the moment, and also where they want to go. And also, of course, we need to figure out what are the pain points without actually telling them, hey, this is where you have challenges. No, we need to phrase the questions in such a way that the prospect opens up to us and tells us what their problem is, and making it comfortable for them to say it, right? And that's where the art of sales comes in, which is complete opposite of that kind of pushy and salesy from the 80s or 90s. We also need to ask questions about their implications, meaning the pain points, and then leading on from that, what are the implications on the business? So if they didn't do anything about it, what are the implications of your business? And again, there are sets of questions and sets of, I would say, phrasings that you can use to ask open questions about the situation, about the pain points, about the implications on the business, so that you gather information and you know exactly what the problem is. And if you then have the solution for that, then we go to the need payoff, because then you can say, okay, I understand. So if you had someone offering you X, Y, Z, providing you with a better ROI, a better cash flow or cost savings, whatever it is that you offer in terms of the benefits, would that be a benefit to you? That's a typical need payoff question. And that's the only time or the only point in that conversation where we can really show what we do. So we can pitch what we do. But first of all, we don't pitch. We need to ask specific questions about specific situations, pain points, implications, and the need payoff, in order to being in the position that allows us to say that's exactly what, and we can do it in this way or that way, and so on. And there I said it, it's about your customer, it's never about you. So that's what I mean by customer-centric conversation. By the way, ignore that headline up there, the subject line. That was from a different presentation. So we want to have meaningful conversations with our prospects, and these conversations need to be customer-centric. That's why it's absolutely crucial to frame and phrase your questions in such a way that you make it about the customer and never about the product or the services that you sell or your own brand. So whenever you feel, hey, I'm getting a little bit needy, I want to sell, I want to push, that's the wrong way. And that's why it's very important to have a sales script and know the structure of a sales call and the elements, the important elements of the sales call, so you can always revert back to that call guide or that sales script, and you never lose focus, and you can basically switch around in your sales call. So make it about the customer, make it customer-centric, and never about you. Again, the only time you can talk about yourself is when we get to the point of the need payoff questions, and then we have the allowance, so to speak, so the permission to speak about what exactly we do and the benefits to the customer or the prospect in that case. As I said, we want to have as many meaningful customer-centric conversations as possible, and we want to have conversations that are as meaningful as we can be, or as they can be. It's simply not efficient anymore and sufficient anymore to dial 100 numbers a day and not have one meaningful customer-centric conversation. If you make it about yourself, That's the wrong approach. That doesn't work anymore. The door-to-door sales, even the door-to-door sales, needs to be about the customer. Even if you dial 10, 30, 50, 100 numbers every day, every time you speak to a decision maker or to a prospect, it needs to be about them and never about you. Number 3. Third element, demonstrating capabilities. So now we're at a point in our conversation where we can and must demonstrate our capabilities of solving their challenges and solving their problems. So that's absolutely crucial, because why else would we have that conversation? If we were the wrong solution for them, we could have stopped a long time ago in the conversation. But if every box is checked and ticked, then we get to the point where we have to demonstrate our capabilities. And by the way, this structure, these 4 elements are in order of the conversation flow. So you start with the opening, then you get to the question part, and then you demonstrate capabilities. If you put the capabilities further up in the structure, that's pushy, that's salesy, and that doesn't work anymore in today's markets and today's landscape. So you got to stick to that 4 elements in the order as we discussed that right now. So as I said, talk about your product only after the prospect has explained their pain points, their current situation, maybe their future roadmap, their goals, what they want to achieve in the next 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, and also the implications on the business, on their personal life. By the way, this can be applied to B, but also to B2C businesses. Absolutely no difference. You might need to phrase the question slightly different. The topics might be slightly different, but you can take what we go through here and put it into a B2C business, but also B2B business. Absolutely no problem. So at that point, we have the permission to explain what we do, how we can help, and the benefits to them. And by asking our questions in a strategic and customer-centric way, we understand what benefits they are looking for in a solution. Only when we understand and have asked our set of questions, which we have in our sales script and call guide, about their current situation, about the pain points, about the challenges, about the implications, then we are in a position that allows us to understand what benefits they are looking for. And by taking that, which is basically coming out of their mouth, not ours, and if it's a good fit to our solution, right? I hope, of course, the leads and the prospects you talk to are qualified and pre-qualified, so you know that they have a problem and you have the solution to that problem. We can take what benefits they expect from a solution and say, okay, perfect, completely understand, and that's exactly what we do. That's exactly what our solution does. That's exactly what you get out of it. That's exactly what you get out of working together with us, partnering with us, teaming up with us, right? So then we have the full closed loop, and then we can go for the close. And if you've noticed and realized that we didn't sell anything at that point in time, we asked the questions in such a way that basically we let them tell us everything that we need to know, and then we can go in with a need payoff question and say, yeah, well, okay, basically that's exactly what we do, and then you go to the next step with that prospect. And then if we then can demonstrate our capabilities of solving their problems and adding benefit to their business, to their personal life, again, B2B or B2C, absolutely no problem, we can then go for the close. And as we've seen from the questions and the answers right at the beginning, the close can be, we close them on getting them on a training session, a free training session, or the close can be, we sell them a solution already. So there are different ways of how you can define close according to your KPIs, according to your sales funnel, according to the next steps, how you want the leads and the prospects go through that sales funnel. So a close doesn't necessarily have to mean or have to be like a turning them into a buying customer. As we've seen 20 minutes ago, it can also mean let's onboard them for a free training session. And then it goes on in the sales funnel. We pick up the phone afterwards and say, how did you like it? And how do you want to proceed? And then we can basically do the same thing with the same structure. We go through the sales script, and then the call to action and the objective of that follow-up call is of course different, because we have them in the training session, and then what's the next step, what's the next objective. So the close in that case could be to onboard them as a paying customer. So that there are different ways of identify what a close means to you and your business, and that's absolutely fine. Number 4, obtaining commitment. Now that's absolutely crucial, and if we hang up the phone and we don't have any commitment, then it wasn't the greatest sales call. As we've seen earlier on from the replies and your feedback, of course you obtained commitment, right? You sold a customer, you sold them on a product and they paid, but the other thing was that you sold them on a free training session. So that is the commitment that we need at the end of the sales call. And before we even do that, we need to understand and we need to know what it is that we want their commitment for. What is the next step in our sales funnel, right? So what is the next step? Where do we push the prospect or then the lead further down into our universe of sales and marketing, into our universe of brand? And that is very important to have that commitment at the end of the call. And there will always be some form of CTA at the end of the call. And CTA means call to action. You probably heard of that from e-commerce, online marketing. A call to action can be a button, it can be like sign up for a newsletter or buy here or learn more, or whatever the call to action is, that needs to be implemented in the 4th element of every sales call. And for example, it can be a lead handover, right? Lead handover from marketing to sales, or from within the sales organization to the account manager, whatever it is. It can be a future callback, for example. So you go out from the call, but you have set a date of a future callback, which basically means both you and the prospect have agreed to speak again at a certain point in time, ideally somewhere within the next week, 2 weeks. That's absolutely fine. That's ideal. And then you have the next, hopefully meaningful, customer-centric conversation, but also with a different prospective outcome in mind, because you've been further down the line, further down the sales funnel with that prospect. It can be further information requested. They want to see, maybe they want to see a proposal, maybe they want to see a brochure, maybe they want to see something that gives them more information about the products and the services that you provide. It can be a link to a website, whatever it is that you have that gives them all the information that they need. That's basically the call to action. And also there are certain sets of questions, certain ways of understanding and knowing what exactly it is that they want to see to make a sophisticated decision. Sometimes they request information just to get you off the phone, which is absolutely fine. But there are certain questions that you can ask to make absolutely sure that when you take the time to send them more information, that they will click on the email and read it. Or, as we said, it can be a proposal or any other next step in your sales funnel. Thank you very much. That was the presentation. That was the 4 elements of a sales call. Now, as promised, we are going to answer all of your questions in the chat. If you have any more questions, type them in right now. But before we do that, I want to share with you something exclusive that we launched just recently, which is our HoneyComb Growth Academy, which is basically a space where we provide tactical training and strategic mentorship. And we do that for entrepreneurs, business owners, but also for teams, for larger organizations, sales teams, marketing teams, you name it, we do it. And where you can find it is honeycombagency.co.uk/academy. You find all the information that you need about that Growth Academy, what we do, what you can expect, the benefits that you reap when you join the Academy, and also the pricing, of course. Now, let's have a look in the chat and let's go through the questions one by one. So the first question that we had back very early in our presentation: would you call the company again if they are not keen on doing business with us? Absolutely, I would. That's just an objection. And we talk about that in objection handling, but also objection prevention. If they are not keen on doing business with us, well, there must be a reason for it. And with our sales script, we can ask the right questions. It's not the best timing. They need to come up with a strategy first. They don't have the budget. They don't have the problem that we have the solution to. So if that is the outcome of the call, then you need to ask more questions, right? You need to understand what exactly the objection is and then handle it, or even better, prevent it. That's what we do when we talk about the band and spin and fab and so on, these different methodologies in terms of sales calls and cold calls and sales conversation. I would say yes. Call them again, because you never know. If it's a large corporation or large organization, people get hired and fired all the time. So the person that you have talked to this month might not be there anymore in 6 months' time. Or even if they are, the situation might have changed, right? The strategy might have changed. Circumstances might have changed. Just because someone tells you never to call again doesn't prevent you from going in, maybe not in 1 week's time, but maybe in 3 months' time, maybe in 6 months' time, maybe even in 1 year. You never know. If you work with large organizations, there's always like a budget cycle. And if they don't have the budget for this year, maybe then it's available next year. And then you need to ask questions, of course, about the budget. When does the budget cycle start? When is the decision made about the budget? But also for B2, if you have B2C clients, just because someone doesn't want to do business with you doesn't mean that they will never do any business with you, right? It's just a temporary objection that they have. And B2P, B2C or retail could be, well, I have to think about it, or I have to talk to my wife. That's a classic. And then there are certain ways how you can get around that, and how you can, or questions that you can ask to really dig deeper into what the actual objection is. So the answer to that is, yeah, definitely. Keep them in your system and call them again and see what has changed. And maybe your services have changed, maybe your products have changed, maybe you expanded your portfolio of services and products, and maybe further down the road in 6 months' time, the timing is perfect and the solution is perfect, and boom, you have a deal, you have a sale. I just scroll through the questions. What do you mean with get commitment to ask questions? I don't think I could be clearer. So we need to get commitment to ask questions for a very particular reason. Once they've given us the permission to ask questions, we can ask questions. If we go into a sales call and overwhelm them with a flood of information and questions, and they haven't given us their permission to do, they will never open up. You will never get the rapport that you need from the start to get the conversation flow. And get commitment to ask questions can be something like, for example, hey, I've seen you do this or that, or you're responsible for XYZ. Can I ask you a couple of questions about that? Or I've seen you have project XYZ. Can I just quickly ask you 1 or 2 questions about that, right? So once they say yes, you have the commitment. You have permission to ask these questions, right? Let's not overcomplicate these things. Commitment is a big word. We can also say permission. It can be just a simple question like, mind if I ask you 1 or 2 questions? Or there are other ways around that as well, which is a little bit more advanced. But basically, once we have that permission to ask questions, we are then in our sales script, right in our call guide, and we can go through all of the questions that we need to ask in order to qualify them. With a new service, how to approach a previous customer, newsletter or a straight call. It depends how many customers you have and what the nature of your business is, and also what the relationship with your customers are. So you might have a hierarchy of important customers. You might have a division between B2C or B2B. You might have customers who bringing large volumes of revenue, and you might have smaller customers. Depends on how many customers we are talking about. If it's B2C, if it's something that they can buy online, shoot out a newsletter. If it's something that needs more explanation, if it's something targeted more to the B2B side, or if it's something that is of a higher value than your other products, then pick up the phone to your best customers and practice that. Practice the sales script, practice the call guide with them, and really present that one-to-one in a sales call. It's always better to talk. I know email marketing is absolutely crucial and it works like a charm if you know what to do. It's absolutely fine for these smaller transactions. I would say up to, let's say, £100. That's absolutely fine. So just go with it. If you have 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 newsletter subscribers or customers in your database, send out a newsletter and do that. If you have, as I said, customers, higher volume customers or higher value customers, it's always worth picking up the phone, because then you can react. That the customer, you can ask more questions, what they have done in the past, how much they spent. So if they had spent, let's say, I don't know, £10,000 last year, and you have a product that is at a higher price range or price tag as what they used to buy, then it's always worth picking up the phone. And in general, although I'm a fan of digital marketing and email marketing and content marketing, I'm an advocate of that. I'm also an advocate making sales calls. If you don't know how to sell on the phone, if you don't know how to sell in person, it's going to be very difficult for any business that you have. There's another question, P2C currently, so I think that refers to the previous question. What I would do is sit down, have a look at my previous or existing customers. How much do they spend per month? How much do they spend per year? What's the average customer lifetime value? What's the average value that they have bought in the past? What are the products that they have bought, right? Topic, categories, and so forth. And then hopefully your new product is complementary in some form or expansive on the existing product range, with either cross-sell potential, right? You have something complementary here, you can cross-sell, or with upsell potential. Yeah, you have something of more value, and that can mean adding more value, adding more benefits, but also the price tag, then you can upsell existing customers. I would always go for picking up the phone and talking to them, especially when you're talking about higher price tags. And if you have, again, as I said, I'm repeating myself, if you have a subscriber base within your newsletter, you can also try a combination of, so you basically teaser the new product in a newsletter. Maybe you can select customers, let's say the broad customer base, and then select customers of a higher lifetime value, and you can do both. And then you can pick up the phone the next day and say, hey, we just sent you an email yesterday with some exciting new things that we do, and lead into the conversation with that. Thank you very much for that question. Really good question. Thanks for asking. I don't see any more questions. If I have missed one, please remind me and copy and paste it again. But I think we've gone through all of the questions that we have right here in the chat. If you don't have any more questions, let's call it a wrap. Thank you all very much for your time, for listening, for taking the time out on this Tuesday evening. We always have the strategy sessions every Tuesday, 6:30 London time or British time. So next week we are going to announce that strategy session very soon. If you haven't joined our meetup group, do that. If you're interested in what we do with the HoneyComb Academy, let me put the link. I should have done that earlier. Let me put the link in the chat so you can just click on it and have a look around what we do. It's similar to what we do here. The difference is the depth of information, the broadness of the information, and basically more time telling you about sales methodologies, marketing, and so forth. So it's a deep dive into everything that we do. Have a look at it. And if you have any questions, feel free to send us an email at consulting. Let me put that in the chat as well. consulting@honeycombagency.co.uk. And I don't see any more questions. And that's a wrap. Thank you all for your time. I see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.